Welcome to the LifeBeat podcast, a One Joshua Group production, providing access to information and experts to improve quality of life and health outcomes.
So we've gone outside of our circles, and now we're coming back into our circle. Are we any better off having integrated and segregated again? Are we any better off? I know you didn't think I was going to say that, did you? But are we any better off having experienced something outside of our normal spaces and come back into those spaces that we operate in?
That's a hard question because there's so many other factors outside of our circles that we didn't have in our circles, right? So even what we as a people have been able to accomplish from an economic perspective, that would not have been realized if we had stayed in our circles. It's a reality.
That is
The
so
question
hard.
is who's the draw of the circle?
That is so hard. Does economic accomplishment and educational attainment mean that we...
Oh, that's a whole nother segment. That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show. Oh,
But it made you smile.
you ain't gonna get me in trouble. That's a whole nother show right there.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you let
the
us...
real educated of Atlanta. No, it was just as I was just kind of jotting down because I was pondering over these questions, right? And I was just kind of making some thoughts, even when we say stakeholders. What does that mean for us? We immediately go to the person that we think has the greatest value proposition. And that's usually the person we think that has the greatest resources. But the person with the most resources may not necessarily be the person with the greatest value proposition.
Resources really have to be based on what you see your need to be, because it may not be relevant. It may be. And I think sometimes that's how we get caught up or caught. Interesting.
Because we may devalue my granny who lived around the corner from this building because she was not college educated, not wealthy. But let somebody need to know something in the community that the wealth of her wisdom is something we have devalued.
So she could tell you who to go see.
She could tell you who to go see. She could tell you what you need to say when you go see them, not because she had read it in a book, but she had heard enough narratives to be able to curate her own kind of response to things. And she's seen enough things that have the narrative to help filter how you need to say it.
And she would tell you to tell them that I sent you.
And just by saying, Miss Florence sent me, you had instant credibility. That person was willing to listen to you because Miss Florence sent you.
Interesting.
So as we overuse words like trust and trustworthiness, why are we talking so much about trust and trustworthiness, right? We never used to talk about this stuff before. Now we are like, oh, trust and trustworthiness. It was automatic. It was evident. It was never spoken, but always understood. But you know us. You know us intellects.
Yeah.
We got to research it, add some more syllables to it.
So my name is Kermit Payne, and I'm the host of LifeBeat, a podcast series. And you've been listening to the muses of more than just a wise woman, but someone who's been there and done that. Welcome, and thank you for listening, and thank you for viewing. Today, we'll continue to explore why we need to ask the questions and be responsible for the tough answers, but still want to be able to answer the questions. And as Ms. Chambers told us, and remember who sent you, because who sent you will be important. Ms. Shonta Chambers is a nationally recognized authority on building advocacy, helping us create collaborations, the importance of storytelling, and also the importance of listening. She's been advisor to many, but most of all, she does just that, listens and helps us interpret and to create strategies. Shonta, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kermit. Thank you, Kermit, for having me here today. This is very surreal. And I say this is very surreal because I literally grew up 2 minutes from this building. So my roots in community, everything I know about community, my passion for community, it was all birthed less than 1 mile from here at my granny's house.
Around the corner.
Right around the
Right
corner.
around the
Isn't that
corner.
how life will do us?
Right.
It'll bring us back to where we started,
Mhm.
baby, at the moment when we need it.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for having me here. I can't wait for this conversation.
Oh, it's going to be more than a conversation. It's going to be groundbreaking. We use a word, stakeholders. Can you tell us what that means?
I think stakeholders is one of those words where we ascribe value to an individual or group where we think we share a commonality towards a certain goal. I thought about that, right? I thought about that as I was preparing for our conversation today. And when we start thinking about stakeholders, it's also driven by what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So, for example, if we want to focus on patients living with chronic and complex health conditions, patients are our stakeholders. If we wanted to say, look at the environmental context of our communities, then guess what? Residents in those communities become our stakeholders. If we wanted to look at the economics of our society, everyone becomes our stakeholders, where there's clergy leaders, whether it's employers, where it's banks, where it's individuals who work hard every day. So I think when we use this term stakeholders, we're really asking ourselves this question: who else is this issue important to? Who else could potentially be impacted by this issue? And thirdly, who else can we galvanize around solutions to this issue? So that's the 2025 Shonta version of stakeholders.
So Shonta and I had an earlier conversation about brain dumping, and so she's telling me this, and I have all this going in my mind about what I can say, but we have not limited time, but we have some restricted time, and I'm going to try to stay on focus so we don't just ramble and have hours of conversation.
Yes.
So the role of a stakeholder, who listens to that, and what do you see that role of a stakeholder as being?
So I think first of all, we have to be careful by relegating someone that we've identified as a stakeholder to only one role. So I think sometimes we pigeonhole people and we put limitations on people. So let's say, if I use a very concrete example, let's say if we wanted to have a conversation around oversaturation of title pawn shops in Black neighborhoods, we would ask ourselves the question: who else is impacted by this? Who is this important to? And who could help bring forth resolution? People within that community, they're going to be stakeholders. The local legislators that are approving business license and things of that nature for these types of establishment to operate, they are going to be stakeholders. So the role for each of those stakeholders is going to be different. So for example, for those folks in that community, they may say, hey, guess what? Every 2 blocks, we have a title pawn. We have more title pawn shops in our communities than we have a grocery store. So, Mr. Legislator, Mr. Local Council Person, can we have some conversations around the oversaturation of title pawn, but then the less presence of what I really need in my community, such as access to healthy foods and things of that nature. So we're talking about two very different stakeholder groups with two very different intentions. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal should be the same, which is really about the health of the community. Not just the physical health of the community, but the economic health of the community. So I would just caution us that as we talk about stakeholders, be careful about just limiting them to one sole function, because the community stakeholder is going to be very vested in all things that impact their community. A legislative stakeholder is going to be invested in all things that really impact that community. So let's just be careful about pigeonholing people.
I guess that a role is multifactorial. It has multiple uses, and it would also mean that we need to investigate our multiple approaches. And you talked about legislators, policy makers. What kind of advice do you have singularly as a stakeholder in the community right around the street where Granny lived? How do we start to make an investment by reaching out to our legislators? How do we do that? Who do we call? What do we say to them? How do we help organize that?
Oh, wow. I've been waiting for this question a long time. I said, I think we should go back to politics where all campaign people have a $25 budget and you got to make that $25 work. And what will happen, people will go back to community and have real conversations with community members about what's important to them. So I think what we have to do is we can't take a passive approach to really resting on our laurels when it comes to the community by which we live. Things are ever changing, whether there are things in our community, whether there are healthcare or whatever, things are ever changing. So if I were to go back to your question about, where do we start? So I'm going to actually use a community in Chicago as an example. So there's a community on the south side of Chicago, and there was this landfill that's called Bishop Ford Landfill. That landfill sits on a water line that feeds into most of the low-income South Chicago communities, right? Last year, we had the pleasure of hosting what we called a toxic tour. Why would you even need to host something called a toxic tour in 2025? Because it's so important for people to understand that there are living conditions by which people are living in every single day that are below substandard, but everybody can't pick up and relocate. So it's so important for us to understand that albeit we may be in a specific community, we truly do have the power to augment that very community by which we live. Because the individuals that we elect for our councils, for our commissions, and all of these places, they're accountable to us, the people. What happens is they hope that we never hold them accountable to us. So thinking about this Southside Chicago community, what we're really doing is building the advocacy capacity of individuals in these communities to say, yes, we can't relocate you. And yes, just because you can't relocate, that does not mean that you should not have access to the same quality of life for someone who may be living in another community. And we're going to give you the skills and the tools so you can march down to the next alderman meeting and raise these issues. We're going to teach you how to understand the data of your community. We're going to teach you how to make your pitch and tell your story with power, with clarity, with conviction. And we're going to also show you that you can augment the decisions that are being made regarding your community. But oftentimes people feel like, oh, well, this is just how things are. No, things got this way because we sometimes took a backseat approach to things. Now is the time for us to come to the edge of our chairs, re-engage, go get those stakeholders in the community, because guess what? This is somebody else impacted by this issue. This issue is important to others beyond just us. And collectively, we can bring forth a solution to this environmental issue that's showing up in our community. Because again, we can't relocate everybody, but what we can do is advocate for changes for where we are.
Ms. Chambers, in our research, we received a 28-minute video around triple negative breast cancer and storytelling in a project. Now, when I started to look at that, I said, I have 5 minutes and I'm going to watch 5 minutes and I'm going to skip through this and get my 5 minutes so I can be prepared. Well, I ended up sitting down. So I watched, I think it's 28 minutes. So I ended up watching all 28 minutes of the video. Can you tell us about that video, about storytelling and how we learn to advocate and approach those people that can assist us? And we're going to come back and talk about the environmental issues and advocacy after we talk about that. Can you share that with us, that story?
Yeah, so the documentary is But Yet They Rise. So it features the story of 4 African-American women from Southside Chicago. When we hear Chicago, all we ever hear, the only narrative we hear about Chicago are gangs and how many people got killed before 2 o'clock. But what we never hear is the story of resilience and strength. And so what we wanted to do with this documentary, But Yet They Rise, is tell that story. We wanted to tell a story of resilience of these women in this actual documentary, but also use it as a teachable moment to help people understand that not everyone's experience with the healthcare system is the same. So here are these stories of these women who have had various encounters with our current healthcare system. But guess what? They represent so many other women, so many other stories. But in spite of it all, they rise. And what have they done with that? They've turned it into advocacy. They've turned it into telling my story so that other women can understand that what you may have experienced, unfortunately, is not unusual, but you're not alone. Telling these stories so that we can go to our decision makers and say, hey, we need to think differently around how we deliver care to individuals of color or those who are low income and uninsured. We need to tell these stories to challenge the status quo so that we look introspectively and ask ourselves, am I going into my care delivery with bias? Is that coming out in how I'm interacting with individuals? We wanted to tell this story because we had an opportunity to change the narrative of how we think about Chicago. And so, yeah, everybody may not see it, but guess what? Everybody doesn't see the evening news. But this is an opportunity to tell collectively the story of these women who are so different in terms of their experiences, but they were all triple negative breast cancer survivors. We have a physician in there intentionally because sometimes we can think that, oh, this only happens to this population of people. No, everybody encounters sometimes some disheartening experiences with our healthcare system. But even with that, there was such a resolve in us that when we tell our collective story, that's what raises the experiences of individual. That is what brings about change.
Well, these stories are so important, and they are stories that still need to be told. We do not need to eliminate something because it does not meet someone's personal need. We will not grow if we eliminate those things, the information that's caused us to change. In New Orleans, in Louisiana, there is an area called Cancer Alley, I think. And this woman has lost her funding. She's had this ongoing project, environmental again, similar neighborhood, similar population, females. And so it's not just Chicago. It is the issue that is consistent within our neighborhoods for people with and without, and we're seeing a lot more of those people who were with that are without now access to care and having an understanding about that. So now that we've broached the subject of advocacy, how do we go about creating partnerships, something else you're very actively involved in, collaborations to help us get to the right people to discuss this? The $25 for a budget of people who are involved in advocacy, shareholder, neighborhood development. I think we've forgotten about neighborhood planning units and the importance of those. How do we help elevate other people who really have voices, but they are voiceless because they don't know how to use those for advocacy? What kind of strategies do you recommend we can employ?
So, in my brain dump, I started to make this list of stakeholders. And on this list, I had NPUs, neighborhood planning units. I had patients. I had caregivers. I had academia. And I had academia from education at the elementary level all the way through college. I had our clergy and faith-based organizations. I had our employers. We don't talk about our employers. We don't talk about those entities. If there was ever a time where it is so critically important for us to come off our islands of one, now would be that time. I'll give you a perfect example. Anybody who has been living on planet Earth has been hearing all of the conversations around the proposed Medicaid changes. Those are going to have major implications for patients living with chronic conditions, their caregivers, employers, clergy leaders, NPUs, that whole group of stakeholders. Those are going to have major implications because somebody may say, well, I'm a clergy leader. What does a Medicaid reduction have to do with me? When your congregants are sitting on the pews and they're trying to make these critical health decisions between what am I going to do for my house and paying for my tithes and offerings and things of that nature, it is going to have implications for you as you try to do ministry.
Indeed.
If that provider that's sitting on your pew now has a lower reimbursement and he or she now has to close that practice that they've been so passionate about operating for years, that is probably the primary source of care for many of your constituents, your congregants in your pews, that's going to have major implications. But we only think that the Medicaid reduction is only going to impact Medicaid beneficiaries. It is going to have a ripple effect for the economies of every single community. This is an opportunity before us to really activate in our local communities, whether we have to build these small coalitions to really understand what does this or what will this mean for me? What will this mean? What will this Medicaid, as this example, what would this Medicaid reduction mean for the kids that are being educated in our schools? What is this going to mean for that person who may now be either Medicaid insured or insured in ACA? Let's not forget those premium subsidies are going to end the end of this year. So where they may have been able to afford that insurance, they may not. We know that insurance is a gateway to health. An unhealthy employee is a non-present employee. A non-present employee is a non-productive employee, right? Again, but we're talking about Medicaid, the potential implications for all of this. For patients who can't get care, who've maybe been maintained well, because now they have a provider close to their neighborhood that they can get to, but now all of that may go away or change. It all has major implications. So I just gave you 3, 4, 5, maybe different stakeholder groups: employers, clergy leaders, individuals living with chronic conditions, caregivers, the academic institutions in your area, and the employers. What if there was some local coalition formed with all of those stakeholders? Because now we're rethinking the implication of this Medicaid reduction. It is now important now to all of these other stakeholders. They have what's needed to bring about change if we organize and galvanize in a very intentional way. Then you work with whoever your local academic partner is to bring the data to be able to tell you, well, what does this mean for the citizens in this community? Then when you take this community and spread that data out and say, what does it mean for the next 10 communities in this area? Then you're going to your local board of commissioners, or maybe you need to go to your local legislator and say, did you know that if this is realized that 20, 30, X% of the people in our community may no longer have access to insurance? Mr. Legislator, when you came to see me during election time, you stood on the promise of X. Now I need you to stand on the promise of what's important to the constituents in your community.
It's so important that we remember what the expanse of the scope of that is. You said earlier what people should get off of there, and this is a clean show. I didn't know what you were getting ready to say, but that was probably what we really meant to say. But we don't think about that same reduction in Medicaid will impact the pharmacy. It will impact the bodega. It will impact even to the place that when you pull up on the corner and there's someone standing on the corner that you may no longer have that extra $5, $10, $20 to give to the woman or the man and the children in the local grocery store parking lot. So it is indeed a closed circle. It's not an open circle. It keeps that as we look at how money, revenue, resources, we talked about that, circulates in our community. There's so many questions, but I think we have a lot of those answers. Being able to come together in a collaborative spirit and still understanding that we all don't have to agree, but we can come to a consensus of what is for the greater good of everyone involved. And participate at that place at the greater good. Now, sometimes you don't have to be heard. My grandmother, your granny around the street, told me that you don't have to be loud to be heard. And just remember, as we think and do our own brain dumps about what this means for us going forward, to take the time to be present, to advocate being present, to be sure that we are participating and attending the school meetings, so when they start eliminating homerooms and they start eliminating time for students to grow and they start eliminating pep rallies for us to have for our children learn more social norms, that we get a chance to advocate for a better America because we have increased not just economically, but what our social skills are. Now, you talked about something, I don't want to get into all of that, but you mentioned the big 4-letter word. This is a good 4-letter word. This is data. We're talking about is data. So this is data. 4 letters, data. I think sometimes at what we believe the communities live, where we all live, work, and say, we may go somewhere, but it's the same community. We don't always know who our neighbors are, the strength of what they are. Tell us about advocating for access to data and what that data represents and how we at the community level can better understand that.
So I think we have to ask ourselves, what's the data that we're really trying to access? Because we can sometimes be redirected in a way that we get caught up in the minutia so that we don't focus on the key things. I think we find ourselves in a society now where there is, to some degree, a lack of appreciation for data. When we can very kind of casually shut down the data warehouse of the country, that tells that there is some lack of either understanding or appreciation for data. But I think some of that comes from the fact that we only tend to place our greatest value on quantitative data. Whereas within the context of our community is enormous qualitative data. So even in the absence of what we think we may have access to, qualitative data, aka storytelling, is an invaluable tool. So maybe, you don't have communities that are sophisticated enough to be able to access these large data sets and really understand it. But what they can do is go sit on the front porch with their community and take that qualitative data, which is the real-time, real experience, unfiltered experiences of those in their community to help inform a plan of action to respond. In evaluation, there's this technique that's called photo voice. And what it allows you to do is take pictures of what you see in a community. That's data. That's also storytelling. So I think what I would really recommend for us not to allow ourselves to become paralyzed in this staunch approach against data is to look at the data that we have and restate this enormous value on the qualitative data that exists in every single community in this country. What it's going to challenge us to do is come out of our homes, get away from our devices, and look up and actually have a conversation. Because guess what? Your next door neighbor may be having the same challenge that you're having, and you don't even know it because we don't have conversations anymore. Qualitative data is a great resource that we can tap into to get real-time experiences of the people in the community that we want to actually be able to help, that we want to be able to actually support. Let's do that. Let's get back to that. I think all of this is driving us to get back to basics. There were no major epidemiologists during the civil rights movement, but people knew that things were wrong. They knew it felt unpleasant. They knew that, guess what? On my street, all of us are going through the same thing. It was all qualitative data because we talked to each other. And we begin to catalog those experiences. And once we begin to catalog those experiences, we allowed them to curate our approach. We allowed it to drive us to take these stories and people and mobilize them towards a decision. And like you said, a decision that was for the greater good for everyone.
Shonta Chambers has joined us today, the advocate, the activist. I better move. She didn't say I could say that. The collaborator builder, the influencer who reminds us to remember ourselves and to remember our needs, and also to remember what we could contribute. And to go back to her for our closing words or our words to remember, Shonta, what do you see our call to action to be to get us out of this mess? Where can we go to get some answers so that we can become a better advocate?
You know, I think if we're honest, some of the best things come out of messy situations. That is where our faith is tested. That's where our resilience is strengthened, because it allows us to go deeper in understanding who we are. So I think our path forward is one that has always been. It has been a collective resolve where we focus on not just ourselves, but the person to the left of me, the person to the right of me. Understand our commonalities, even understanding and appreciating our differences. But at the end of the day, identifying that North Star. Because if we're really honest, we're more alike than we are different. But we allow these gnats, all this other stuff, these just gnats. We cannot lose focus on what it is that we all desire. And that is the best opportunity to pursue the quality of life that resonates with me, that takes into account what's important to me and my values and my family's values and things of that nature. Yes, it's ugly, it's messy, it's all of those things. Those things are not within our control. However, it doesn't mean that we have to concede everything. We can challenge the status quo, but we can't challenge the status quo as a team of one. We can only challenge it when we are willing to step outside of ourselves, identify other stakeholders, Galvanize those stakeholders, mobilize, and don't take no for an answer. I'll also end with this. Heather Green has a TED Talk that highlights, when racism hurts everyone and how even when the common good, it benefits everyone, that sometimes people will allow something like race to really hinder something that could be so beneficial for the masses. We don't have time for that. We have to really understand what is going to be most beneficial for our communities. How do we galvanize together and move our entire communities forward? We can't rest until that happens. It's not about me, myself, and I. We have to go back to what my granny taught me, which meant those biscuits on that stove that sat there, they weren't just for the people in the house.
No.
They were for the people in the community. So our efforts can't be just for the people in the house. They have to be for the people in the community. So let's galvanize our stakeholders, identify our goals, and move forward together.
I remember those biscuits. Nobody came and left without one. I'm Kermit Payne, and I'm your host for LifeBeat, the radio magazine and the podcast series, sponsored by One Joshua Group. And remember what Shonta told us, be your own North Star, but not by yourself. Remember to be kind to yourself and be kind to others.
We would love to hear from you. Send your listener letters, questions, and topic requests to media@theonejg.com. LifeBeat, the podcast, is sponsored by One Joshua Group, your strategic source for engagement to improve life through better health, education, and information. To learn more, visit us at theonejg.com or follow our work on social media using #OneJGCollabs. One Joshua Group, advancing access to healthcare and education by joining what you know with what we've learned.